not be talking about transcription. This is my program for the next 20 minutes, so you can see I will have to speed up a little bit, of course. Traditionally, the idea behind transcription is that it deals with the textual inscription, that's the quotation from an article by of the document, that there is a total linear order in the text and that there are signs and characters that can be identified objectively. The idea is that textual identity lies in the linguistic code of the text, that is, in the wording or lettering. But who believes in such an approach today? There are many theoretical problems with the traditional approach. I'd like to sum them up in my own conclusion, that it is impossible to state the closest set of features or facts to be transcribed in order to produce identical texts that is independent from time or technology. It's impossible to clearly define what is a letter or a character or a sign within a writing system and which sign or character it is. There are practical problems as well. Transcription depends on the expected usages of a transcribed document. With the digital turn at the latest, users have expectations towards transcriptions that are way beyond the linguistic code. I will skip some cases. Increase what I can read from my notes. My theory of transcription is largely based on a theory of text that I have elaborated earlier, maybe 10 years ago, and presented elsewhere, but haven't published in an accessible way so far. I'm very sorry for that. That theory of text aims on text not as the creation of new text, but on text as the reproduction of textual objects. Insofar, it's a useful basis for modeling transcription as well. To keep it very, very short, what is text as reproduction of text? Text is an attempt to convey meaning by expressing it verbally and fixing it with a document or by a medium. There are other positions in between these main three positions. Text may be seen as, for example, a word with a specific structure beyond the linguistic code. Text may be seen as a set of graphs, signs, or themes that can be interpreted as meaning characters or words. And text can be seen as a visual phenomenon that sometimes carries semantic information directly and not via written language. That's why this forms a circle and not a line. Of course, I do not intend to state that there are only 6 notions of text, but rather that there is a whole universe of textual notions, sometimes even mixed or to be located as ranges on the wheel of text, which I would call a pluralistic model of text. So let's talk about transcription. Transcription is reading written down again. That's why traditionally transcription leads to a linear set of characters and words. Text is what you look at and how you look at it. Text and transcription is defined by the glasses you wear, by the tools you apply. Transcription is mapping perception towards the target system. And then by reading or applying textual criticism, you add information to the transcription. So there are reproductive and productive forces at work. What we create with digital transcriptions are potentially information-rich resources, representations that are not media presentations in the first place, but that are transmedia digital representations which become media presentation in a further step of processing. Transcription as a result of reading. That seems to be pretty straightforward. You read text and write it down. But that's not true when you take a closer look at it. What you get is a physical document. What you see is a visual thing. What you read are signs, glyphs, graphemes. And the result is a construction. Let's have another example. What you see might be a picture. On a grapheme level, we would have to transcribe it like that. Recoding it in the contemporary alphabet that doesn't have a V would lead to this one. Taking our modern alphabet as a target system would lead to this one. But universal, as a word, is not the result of a simple rule-based character translation or identification. It's a result of the identification of the string as representing a certain abstract word, which then is written down again. That was a traditional approach uncovered. That was the approach as triggered by print culture and its promotion of an abstract and word-letter-oriented notion of text. With the digital turn and its support for visual presentation, as well as multiple presentation, a pluralistic notion of text is facilitated. In this media and culture environment, various information channels may be transcribed and encoded, like an image, mise-en-page, description of textual areas, graphemes, graphs, letters, or the structure of a work. Still, transcription is the distinction between noise and information, between noise and signal, and that distinction is made by the chosen text model or target system, which is like a pair of glasses. What is noise for one target system is information or signal for another. There will never be a possibility for not having noise filtered out. No possibility to be complete towards all possible recordable facts. There is another old problem that can be addressed by this approach: authenticity and identity. Identity is determined by the limits of the target system. A document and its transcription can be identical if the transcription is complete and without errors according to the target system and its rules. Identity may lie in the use of documents and transcriptions. If they serve the same purposes equally well, they might be called identical. Some of the transcriptional processes seem to be productive rather than reproductive, but some people might argue as well that this is not transcription but rather editing. Possible examples of productive processes in transcription are shown here. We could say we have reproductive forces mainly on the side of the physically and visually given, and productive forces on the side of the more abstract notions of text. Maybe this isn't very convincing, since all transcriptive processes are interpretative processes, and interpretation is productive. And it may depend on your own notion of text. If you believe that a text is completely constituted by the linguistic code, then you may understand the notation of that linguistic code as reproductive, as a reproductive act rather than a productive act, as I would do. Maybe we would have to concede that within the mapping from the document towards the target system, there are interpretative and thus productive processes. Think of a physical description of a document, a manuscript description, for example. So we would have to draw another line between reproduction and production, as is shown here. Maybe the distinction between reproductive and productive forces isn't that productive at all. I liked it for a while, but I feel increasingly uncomfortable with it. It would be the first occasion where I would disagree with Mats Dahlström. Eleanor has called it, in another wording, the shift from the mimetic to the analytic level. Maybe that's a better wording. Maybe I will switch to that in the future. Anyway, nowadays, transcription is not only the act of writing down again what has been the result of reading anymore, but with the technologies at hand, it's rather the protocol of reading processes. There's a multitude of possible mappings at the same time. I'd like to make a strong argument here for recording these multiple mappings, which can be justified by the multiple audiences and usage scenarios we have. I'd like to make another strong argument for diplomatic, detailed transcriptions as close as possible to the document. Reading steps are based on each other. Readings are incremental, even over time, with various transcribers or users. There is no way back if you start on a higher level. So we have to start on a level as basic as possible. And I'd like to stress the usefulness of the record of multiple mappings, not just the final results of interpretation. We have seen examples for that in the previous slides, like having a facsimile, which is a sort of transcription to me, and the text, which is obviously. Another trivial example would be to record the abbreviation and the expansion. That's what we do nowadays. But it's a record, it's a notation of multiple readings, of course. Another example. Let's assume we have a text represented or transcribed as a digital image. We have a portion of text describable as a segment, as a zone, for example, of the page having coordinates. You may note that there are signs or even characters, which are, as they are, like SIG, as they are translated to a certain target alphabet. That is already a strong step in processing and interpreting, identifying letters in uppercase, lowercase mode, or which might be corrected because found to be erroneous as compared to an abstract notion of a certain word and its orthographic canonized presentation. You may as well visually note that the print mode is italics. You may interpret that as being highlighted compared to the surrounding text. Or you may find that this has to be called an emphasized mode. And then you may interpret either the word as being or the mode as indicating a person name, which you may identify as the name of a certain identifiable person. And you may as well express this by an RDF statement, like this text is talking about this person. So what we have is multiple notations as a protocol of a reading process where steps are built on each other. The act of transcribing aims at information-rich transcriptions as transmedia representations, which is another theory of mine, which I will not go in detail anymore. From these certain presentations, which are new documents, but which we may as well call performances or editions of a document, of a work, etc., can be generated or medialized. And these may emphasize or address particularly certain notions of text, like a critical work-oriented edition versus a diplomatic document-oriented edition. Can we see the different colors? Yeah, you can see that. So this would be, for example, a more traditional critical edition emphasizing text as a linguistic code and word structure, and that would be more like a diplomatic edition emphasizing text as being a document and having a certain set of graphemes, let's say, for the moment. Of course, this is all known to you. Sometimes it's simply called the single source principle, but I wanted to show this again to make a point for thinking not just in terms of intended presentations or purposes of an intended edition, but also in terms of a description of text as abstract and information-rich and neutral towards presentation media as possible. And yes, I know that there are limits for that approach. One of the oldest core questions on transcription is surely objectivity and subjectivity. The traditional approach distinguishes between Befund und Deutung, as we have heard yesterday, between record or objectively identifiable features, an A is an A is an A, and interpretation on the other hand. Surely I'm not the only one here who doesn't really believe in this distinction anymore. I'd suppose, as a starting point for further discussion, to distinguish two levels. First, every act, oops, what do you see? Everything. That's a pity. No surprise anymore. Every act of transcription is interpretative in the same way, as it is a process of mapping towards a target system. These target systems are disputable. Maybe they are arbitrary. No target system can be complete since it's related to future research questions, which we cannot know yet. For example, I will map these letters onto a given alphabet. I will describe these textual features according to a certain model of a textual genre. There is, for example, a salutation in a letter. Or another example, I will take a digital image of this document with 300 dpi, this color range, this camera, this lens, and this light. All of these are target systems which are disputable and which have to be chosen about. Second, decisions within these mappings towards target systems might be disputable in different ways and on different levels. Two transcribers taking pictures with the same camera in the same setup will probably get the same result. Two transcribers working with the same target alphabet and transcribing strictly on the character level will agree on 99% of the characters. That might be less or more when they transcribe on the word level. Why don't I see all my notes? But as we all know, if we give transcribers a non-trivial document and let them transcribe it according to the guidelines of the TEI, we will probably never get the same result twice. Okay, but the last one was a trap, because here I mixed both levels. If you give somebody just the TEI guidelines, you haven't clearly defined the target system, so you cannot take that as an example. Okay, what is it good for? I think such a model is good for many things. First of all, it's interesting, or it's good for analysis in media history. Which media or text technology supports which notion of text? It might further be useful in teaching textuality, transcription, or editing. It's an extremely simplifying model. That's why it's useful to teach people about textuality. It's a means for cartography and visualization to support better understanding. For example, what do people mean when they talk about transcription or text? So if we have, for example, the literature, articles like that one by Klaus Hüttfeld and Michael Spurbeck-McQueen, what is transcription? We can locate that article on that wheel of text. We can say they are talking about this range, this portion of the model. The same is true for recent works of Peter Stokes on paleography and transcription, on graphs, ideographs, allographs, characters, ontographs. We could as well locate the work of Peter Stokes at a certain place in that model. The same is true for when Melissa Terrace talks on markup on a stroke level. Then she's moving somewhere on text G, text as graphs or graphemes. Or when Melissa Terrace talks about the critical implication of digital imaging. This is talking about transcription in a certain sense. Or when Wendell Peets yesterday talked about text as reaching from plain text to tables. Well, tables are always a very interesting case when we discuss textuality, because with the tables we can see that sometimes the text and its meaning, its semantics, leaps over the linguistic code, because the table is, in the first place, given visually as a visual structure, and we derive a meaning and semantics from it from that visual structure and not from the words that are inserted in the cells. Anyway, how does the model relate to other models? That would be another question. As we said yesterday, maybe we should look for a model of the models we use. Which ranges of the model are covered by which standard, in which way? This can also be cartographied. I don't know. The model may help in the assessment and further development of these standards. And it may serve as a reference for software development. I still dream of a software that supports the notation of a protocol of reading, or as we read. Okay, two examples. How does the model relate to other models? One very trivial example is, of course, this one. Ferber. Ferber can be located here, like that, very, very roughly. You would have to have a more detailed discussion, of course, but that is roughly where Ferber could be localized. Or another example, which ranges of the model are covered by standards in which way? Let's have a look at the TI. Obviously, the TI is traditionally focused on certain notions of text more than on others. So the TI assumes that basically that you have a linguistic code, and you talk about the linguistic code, for example, in terms of structures of genres. That's where the TI is best at, I think. So the TI, in this point of view, is not complete, and it has some biases. But maybe things are on a good way in this example. Because there we have the SIG on manuscripts, we have the SIG on ontologies, and we have another SIG on graphics. So we could think that the TI is on a good way, but of course, this is an extremely optimistic and friendly picture of the TI, as it pretends that there are no gaps left. Maybe sometimes someone will locate all single elements and attributes on this map. That would be nice, and it would be maybe show another picture where TI has biases and where it's strong and where it's weak. And we have another example for another SIG. Where can that be located? The SIG for linguistics. You can see it's not so easy to stick to that very closed model. Everything has its place and fills a gap and so on. And as I said, it may serve, that model may serve as a reference for the development of software that would ideally support multiple notions and multiple notations of texts. Okay, are there further challenges? Yes. What I would like to do, or I would like to see being done in the future is testing the usefulness of the model with real cases, for example, of editing. So we can use that as a guideline for reviewing editions, so to assess what notion of text is behind this transcription or this edition, what range of notions of text are covered by this edition. Of course, this model needs further detailed modeling. For example, the situation in text as a grapheme is a wide range, covers a wide range of phenomena, of features that people want to transcribe. So if I would talk to Peter Stokes, I expect that he would tell me, well, you have to be more differentiated and deal that, and you have this and that, and you cannot pack it all together. So we have to be more detailed in certain areas of that model. We have to talk about various levels of abstraction. Maybe what I showed was processes of reading and interpretation going counterclockwise around the model. Okay, going counterclockwise around the model, but we can also argue that sometimes abstraction and interpretation takes another direction, going from the core of it to outer orbits, I would say, instead of moving around that wheel. Okay, we might further think about transcription and text as an ontological compound object, because what is inherent in that model is a problem. What is actually the ontological status of the things we are describing? And that model suggests that we are describing different things at the same time. We can further think about the depiction of the Ferber levels or Ferber entities on that model, and we would find out then that it's hard to draw a clear borderline for the single Ferber elements. So even if you try to transcribe a Ferber item, you will insert information that belongs to the manifestation, expression, or work level. That's what I mean with ontological compound object. We can think about which steps in mapping and interpretation should be represented explicitly, since many of these processes are rule-based, of course. So the question is, should we note the rules or the results of the application? For example, we could note a rule. All cases of the letter U before other vowels may be converted to the letter V for certain usage scenarios, but then we wouldn't have to note explicitly a V in addition to a U, like in universe. What about concurrent interpretations in their notations? then interpretation may depend on context. We would have to discuss where a borderline between textual representation and external talking about a text may be found. We would have to model interconnections between different documents in text as well as same texts. So what if you take the work as a starting point for transcription? Then you have to integrate various documents. But on the other hand, if you start with a physical document, you have to share information on the work level with other documents. How can we depict these relationships? And finally, of course, we have the problem of texts and their context and the contextuality. How can we depict that on such a model? But that's it for the moment, and thank you very much. Transliteration, to my understanding, is transcription of the character level, right? Is it? Isn't it? so it's basically something here.
What I mean,
so what's your concept of transliteration?
I love the idea of talking about transcription in terms of interpretive approaches. So a transcription is a concise interpretation, is a commentary in a way. If you transcribe a manuscript, this is very evident that the result of this transcription is a result of your interpretation of the text and what you mean, what you see there, or what you interpret that the abbreviation may be like. And this is different to a sort of mechanical approach of transliteration. And so I think there's a step before transcription that could take into account as well. So
but then you mean with transliteration, identification of characters, right?
Well,
or let's say signs.
Yeah.
No, there was some answers.
Okay. So first, thank you very much for a very interesting model to think about. I first want to just confess that I was initially lulled into a false sense of security when I had presumed that your use of the word transcription, just as I was lulled in the correct sense when Alan used the word was intentionality, that your use of the term transcription was similar to Sperber McQueen and Iqbal's use of the term transcription, but in fact they're almost completely unrelated actually. But in that false sense of security, one thing that's fun to do with a talk is kind of to poke at its premises right away. And I think your second slide or so, you said that there are, it's not the case that there are writing systems for which we can, right? Did I phrase that properly? Sipping backwards.
Yeah, it takes some time, I know.
Very impressive, by the way, that presentation.
Yeah, but we are nearly there.
Yeah,
we are.
Yeah,
that's
point down.
that's maybe the most
No,
important
one slide back, perhaps. It's not possible to draw a border between the essential object features. All features are relative to. I think next slide back or next slide forward. Now my mind is just bottled by watching this go by.
No, it can't. There is nothing before that. So it must have been.
I must be making it up. So if it's not possible, so it's not possible to draw clear borders between essential arbitrary features and attributes of the text. I'm thinking that that's probably true for some character sets. I'll bet in the room we would all, or most of us at least, agree that on some character sets, for some character sets that's true. But I'm wondering if we wouldn't also be able to come up with character sets for which it's not true.
That's right. I'm talking about non-trivial documents here. Yeah, there might be a document that is simple and simply contains printed characters, and we would all agree on these characters. But my problem is, what are we interested in when we deal with text? We are interested sometimes in the meaning it conveys. And that may lie not in the characters. And that's where we lose every border.
Okay, so this is where I fell foul of that.
So if we say, okay, transcription is about characters, then you maybe can find a safe ground. But if I'm working with historians, for example, which are interested in facts or something like that, which are not conveyed by the linguistic code, but something else, what can I do for them? How can I argue to them, well, you could have transcription, but it would have no sense, no value for you. So what sense does transcription then have?
Elena.
Let's go back to the transliteration point and the fact that I don't think there is such a thing as a mechanical thing ever. For instance, when you translate the universe, universum, the passage between the U and the V, is that a transliteration? It's just a change of alphabet. We changed the alphabet since the moment in which universe written with a V or with a U was more or less the same thing. And so we could call it that a transliteration. The long S into the small s, is that just a change of character? We change the alphabet, so we do that. But the fact that we are able to get to the universal that is in bold of it is because we map it to our mind, of the word universal that we know. So it makes sense for us to do that. So, I mean, I do agree in the fact that there is a very fuzzy line in between not what it is on the page, but what we choose to see on the page. Because that is the point that is very important. My opinion is not that you're ever reproducing what is on the page, but only what you choose to see on the page. Because put two people together, if there's a printed character, etc., we start to say, okay, yeah, but the new line is not the same thing. We can decide not to do the dimension, the spacing between the letters. Are we always thinking about that? Sometimes the justification of the margin makes bigger space. Is that relevant? Perhaps it isn't. But the point is that the game is always made choices, and there is, in my opinion, as you said, something.
But an evidence that Elena speaks the truth is that if you weren't correct, there wouldn't be CAPTCHA. CAPTCHA, the character transcription system, right?
At three-letter level, perhaps they are happy with that simplification. Perhaps when you do a manuscript, perhaps you're not happy with the simplification. Or sometimes you are. The point is that you cannot say a priori that this is the way it works. You never can say that. And every operation you do when you look at the manuscript, you type something or you write with your pencil, is an editorial interpretation. That's what it is.
I would have to completely disagree with you, Thomas. I don't think you did define transcription. My problem is that transcription seemed to smear itself across everything from duplication to interpretation. And if you're going to model transcription, what I didn't get from your model, I thought your model was fascinating and valuable, a lot of insight in it, but what I didn't get was a model of what you meant by transcription. What is the process that's going on? I mean, as flawed as I think Michael would agree his initial model was, at least that was trying to say, this is the process, this is what happens. It was an attempt to define transcription in the process of modeling it. And what I didn't get from your model was that you were actually defining transcription. You were modeling and defining a bunch of issues around transcription, but not in the center. I couldn't see what was there.
Yeah, but what you ask is what I've noted here. Where is the border? What's the border between transcribing the text, reproducing the text, and talking about the text productively? And my problem is I haven't found that border.
But if the concept of transcription is to have any meaning, then you've got to put a border around it.
Yeah, right. I should have a border, but I don't have one. If you could give me a border, I would destroy the border.
This may address the point that I think Paul is driving at from a different angle. If you go back to the second slide, one that talks about the failure of the failure of the traditional approach to transcription as a method of representing text, and not the failure of a particular account of transcription as an account of transcription. So to come back to your historians, yes, you say to if a historian says, but I don't care what characters are in the in manuscript, I only care about the facts that are attested. My response to the historian is, or my question for you is, since when, in the concept of transcription, take on the responsibility for making every historian happy? Yes, they're not happy with the transcription. So, yes, transcription is not an adequate way to represent every phenomenon that's relevant to textuality. No, there is a difference in the lexicon of English as normally spoken between transcription and facsimile reproduction. And it is precisely the elimination of certain classes of information that make the distinction between transcriptions and facsimiles. There's no need to define transcription in such a way as to ensure that the result is an adequate tool for every conceivable logical scientific operation. Indeed, if you want to know what transcription is good for, you must be willing to assign limits and say, yes, this explains why transcriptions don't do certain things, and they do others.
I see the argument, I see the point, but still, I would ask, how can you define, when you say transcription is about translating science from a document, how can you define the limit of that? Still, I haven't seen. For example, if you have a line break, it's not a sign.
Isn't it?
Well, okay, it's not a discussion, but
it's a serious question. It's a serious question. In any paleographic transcription prepared by a graduate of the École des Chartes, line breaks will be marked.
Yeah, exactly.
Why? Because for them it is an important graphemic element. And the writing system that they are reading in the document makes them want to distinguish that. Now, they transcribe it into another writing system in which it's typically represented in a different way, with a vertical bar.
You tell me, when you talk about transcription, look it up in the dictionary. And then you say, the line break is a sign. So I would say, well, look it up in the dictionary. You said the graphemic entity.
I asked a question. Isn't it? I claim that the difference between transcriptions which record line breaks and transcriptions which do not is quite often traceable to the difference in the writing system applied by the two transcribers.
When people disagree so fundamentally, it may be good to have dinner together.
Continuity at 10:30 your model. So your model is this nice little circle, right? Which makes me think of Hegel. But at 10:30 there is a thing which I'm as an art historian, there's like ontologies on top if I've understood it right, and there is visual out there at say 10 o'clock. How do you connect this? You talked about the rest of the clock all the time.
No, I got what you mean with 10:30.
Yeah, sorry.
So what is the problem with 10:30? Just a moment, please. 10:30.
Okay, so no,
yeah, of course. Yeah. You mean that one?
Yeah. I mean, there are these examples where you do that kind of red circles around, right? And it would be interesting to superimpose all of them, and there would probably be a gap at like 11 o'clock, right? Is that true? Because how do you go from text as an idea, intention, meaning, semantics, and content as text as a visual object? All the ways you described how to transcribe were around basically from 12 to...
Yeah, but that's what why it's certain, because that's not always the case. I'll give you an example, medieval history. So I have an administrative record of taxpayers in the city. And the fact that the names have an order can be interpreted that these are neighbors or living in the same household. So the fact that they are positioned on the page in a certain way has a clear semantic. And so you would, in this case, go from here to there.
I strongly doubt that you could actually, because what you use basically a torus world, a linear model, which is a torus world because the rats are out, right? Yeah. And I don't know if that it's like, it's just like, you know, if like, if you put all the colors into a pane, it's also...
It's eventually oversimplification.
You're saying it's a one-way traffic circle?
Stephen and then Laurent.
I think, I really think that whether this model is right or wrong or useful or not, it exposes a fault line in this discussion. You know, and the fault line is between people who insist that the world is full of nouns and people who insist that the world is full of verbs. You know, do you think things are defined by what you can do with them, the actions in which they are implicated, the processes in which they participate, or do you think they're defined, you know, primarily by some kind of sort of ontological status? So, and I mean, we can hear it in, like, the comments switch back and forth as we go from one person to another. So one person says, what is essential and what is arbitrary in the text depends on what you're trying to do, and two people won't agree, and that's fine. And the next person says, if you don't draw a box around the word transcription and say what it means, it doesn't mean it. And so for me, you know, what the way the conversation is shaking out, and it seems to be critical in a discussion of data modeling, is thinking about that difference, because that deciding where you are on the spectrum between the world is verbs and the world is nouns, it seems to be, you know, sort of, has an effect on the way you think about computational systems and their use or their being.
Directly now to what has just been said, maybe, I mean, carrying on this discussion about the terminology there, we're somehow the prisoners of the terminology from the past, which we're trying to apply again and again, even to someone who's trying to look to the future. I mean, who cares about transliteration, transcription, annotations? We wanted to kill the primary source yesterday. We've got, or annotations as well. I mean, we've got categories in a context where we've seen that with the previous talk. We've got a continuum of objects which we enrich. And most of these objects, we don't have a category, we don't have a noun or a verb for that, for the operation. We know we've added an evolutionary stage. So when we annotate, or when we speak, like you said, I mean, this was very essential when you said, wait, speaking about a text is like transcribing or annotating or what have you. It's just a series of stages. So we need an underlying theory for considering how we organize this graph of changes from a physical object when it exists, because sometimes part of the job is just to reconstruct an object that we know may have existed. I mean, this is the case in many works and manuscripts. And at the end of the day, you've got an object which is never the end of the day, because it's obviously the primary source for further studies. And this is our dream, in a way, is to bring a pool of objects which are constantly enriched by further scholarly activities. So we should try to put those things, where is annotation there, where is transcription, transliteration. Basically, we need to be able to get rid of that. Not easy, because we don't have the words to speak about this.
Aren't you totally overrating the digital? I mean, it's a new medium, but it's not a radical change of the world. We are still working with primary sources and, so I'm not sure that the big revolution won't be coming back to the same concepts, because they're very useful in many different concepts.
Well, I mean, you need the big revolution.
Child of a revolution, aren't you?
Thank you.
I think there is one problem with your model, that it suffers from a very diffuse usage of the term sign. You sometimes use it in terms of something semiologically complex, a linguistic sign, and then you can use it for letters of the alphabet. So I think your model cannot be applied without clarifying what level, semiological or character, operating on.
Usually I try to avoid using the word sign.
You did not?
Yeah, today I didn't, but usually I try to avoid it because I know about these problems. Because
Which word?
sign. Sign.
I'm just curious, did you coin transmedialization, or did I just never see this word before? Transmedialization.
That's what I say in German, yeah.
Did you?
I say Transmedialisierung.
Right.
I would say it's remediation in this.
Yeah, but remediation is something else. Remediation is this.
Remediation is when you make a criminal.
Okay. That's a dictionary.
I have the feeling the discussion is kind of at its end today.